Welcome to your reset with Christiane Piano, where the purpose is to support you in releasing all that you are not, so the truth of who you really are can emerge. This is accomplished through working with the BodyMind from an ontological perspective. We use various modalities to support you in supporting yourself exactly where you are, so that you may return to an experience of wholeness and ease, moment by moment. Deep reflection is one of the greatest tools through which to do this. To take a moment, to pause, assess, reflect, and literally and figuratively reset, come back to center, and move back into your one and precious life with increased clarity and purpose. Hello and welcome. I am Christiane Piano, and this week's episode is about venting. Have you ever felt that surge of anger, that need to just let it all out? We've all been there. And today we're going to explore that feeling and see if there are healthier ways to manage it. As Einstein said, energy can't be destroyed, just transformed. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. How to transform that intense emotional energy into something constructive. One of the greatest challenges in navigating life is learning to come back to center, to a grounded and calm space, neutral, to support us in responding to life rather than simply reacting. If you look around the world, if you look within your own personal orbit, more often than not, when people are feeling something really intense, there is a challenge in acknowledging the experience and diffusing the powerful energy so that it can be harnessed in a constructive manner rather than burning everything in its path. It is quite common to see not only children having a tantrum, but adults as well. It's like an internal alarm going off, signaling a need that hasn't been met. With a tantrum comes a loss of control, and underneath the expression is a cry for help. A need trying to be expressed, but one has not learned how to, and then pent-up energy just bursts out in an explosive manner. This is often what happens when one feels a need to vent. In this episode, we will explore the popular beliefs around venting, some of the latest research being done, practical educational tools and strategies to consider and perhaps harness, and last but not least, possible alternative solutions to support you in creating a more easeful relationship to your own inward training, and if you have children or work with them in any capacity, some things to consider for support and education that will lead to wholeness and respect for self and others. Okay, let's explore this idea of venting a bit. It's something we hear about a lot, right? So when we say vent, we're often talking about wanting to just let it all out, get it off our chest. Simply let it out, especially when we're feeling angry or frustrated. But I've been wondering, could that actually be doing more harm than good? In working with your body, mind, your well-being, learning to live life from balance, coming back to center, resetting, and beginning again, it is a lived practice. Getting curious about everything we experience is a key essential. As long as we are curious and move towards inward, unearth, not only understand, but then move towards experiencing, whatever unfolding is a practice. It is an art, bringing awareness to your experience. This gives you the space from it, and when you are able to allow yourself to be with whatever is unfolding, suspending judgment and riding the wave without getting lost in it, well, as in everything, I offer up a reflection and invite you to try it on for yourself. If it resonates, please do feel free to let me know what unfolds for you in your own personal experience. I've come across some interesting research that suggests our brains might not react to venting in the way we expect. It seems that it can actually start to create a kind of non-constructive pathway in our minds, if you will, making it easier to slip into negative thinking patterns in the future. Have you experienced this personally? Take a moment to think about whatever patterns you have in your relationship to venting and the temporary relief it offers you. Even though we often think that getting it all off our chest is therapeutic, there's actually not a lot of scientific evidence to back that up. In fact, some studies suggest that it could even have negative consequences for our health. Take, for example, the whole idea of blowing off steam when we're angry. It sounds logical, doesn't it? Like releasing pressure. But in a recent study from Ohio State University, looking at a lot of research on anger, found that venting might actually make us more angry. Who knew? As one of the researchers, scientist Brad Bushman, who studies the causes, consequences, and solutions to the problem of human aggression and violence, put it, venting anger might sound like a good idea, but there's not a shred of scientific evidence to support catharsis theory. They also found that activities that raise our arousal levels, like jogging, for instance, might not be the best way to calm down when we're angry. It may give you a sense of temporary release in your body and mind, but perhaps not for our relationship to the emotion in the long run. When experiencing something that triggers us, often a surge of powerful energy may swell through and activate the survival instinct in our brain. And then it's almost like our brains are telling us to vent, and often we do, thinking it is good for us. But the question is it constructive? And will it lead to an internal shift to our relationship in whatever we are experiencing? The research is saying something different. It's a bit of a tricky situation, isn't it? It is a temporary solution and does not get to the core of the issue. Therefore, the cycle continues to repeat itself. Have you experienced this for yourself? Have a think, and perhaps reconsider whatever your present position is at the end of this episode. Together, we will now dive deeper into the science behind anger and arousal. The studies that looked into venting and anger weren't just based on a few people's experiences. They actually involved a pretty large group, a total of 10,189 participants. That's a lot of people, and it really shows how widespread this issue is. And these participants were diverse, representing different ages, genders, cultures, and ethnicities. This broad participation helps to make the findings more generally applicable. And to add to this, I would invite each of us to not only look at the scientific findings, but to our own experience of ourselves and what we see in the world. What the researchers found, and this is key, is that to really manage anger, we need to focus on reducing physiological arousal. That's the physical feeling of being worked up, intense energy spurring thoughts, breathing patterns, emotions, physical sensations, particular holding patterns in our bodies. Whether it comes from the anger itself or from something we do to try and release it, like exercise. Mr. Bushman went on to explain that to reduce anger, it is better to engage in activities that decrease arousal levels. He even pointed out that something we often think of as a stress reliever, like going for a run, might actually be counterproductive because it increases arousal. It's a bit counterintuitive, isn't it? It is not to say that going for a jog is necessarily bad, but if you are interested in shifting out of the reactive state and your relationship to what is unfolding, there are a variety of modalities to consider that will lead to something more life-giving. A return to center, calm, peaceful, ease. The inspiration for this research actually came partly from the popularity of rage rooms, those places where people pay to break things to release anger. It's a fascinating concept, isn't it? But does it actually work? Dr. Sophie Kajarvik, an aggression and violence researcher, challenges the idea that expressing anger in this way is not an effective coping mechanism. She explained, "I want to debunk the whole theory of expressing anger as a way of coping with it. We wanted to show that reducing arousal and actually the physiological aspect of it is really important." The researchers based their review on the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion. This theory suggests that emotions, including anger, have two components: a physiological component, the physical feeling, and a cognitive component, the way we interpret that feeling. Think about what happens when you feel full of rage, intense anger. When you are reactivated, do you notice this two-part factor in your own experience? If you have not yet brought awareness to this experience, perhaps you will begin to explore it for yourself. The researchers looked at both activities that increase arousal, like boxing, cycling, and jogging, and activities that decrease arousal, like deep breathing, meditating, and yoga. They wanted to see which type of activities were more effective at reducing anger. Does that make sense? In the work I do with people and the topics I explore in this podcast, I often refer to the intertwine of the body-mind, distinct but not separate. If we apply this here, once again, we return to understand that it's really about understanding how our bodies and minds work together when we experience anger or any other powerful emotion that tends to sweep us up into a storm. I invite you to pause and think about that for a moment. How do you interpret your physical feelings when you're angry? Perhaps write it down or take a mental note. This conversation is quite personal and multi-layered, so please be gentle with yourself as it requires courage to answer honestly, and I have found it supportive when treating delicate topics such as this one to remind myself that my growth is proportionate to how willing I am to be honest with myself. So we've talked about how venting might not be the best way to deal with anger, right? But that doesn't mean we should just ignore it. Anger is a signal, and it's important to understand what it's telling us. If you have not yet listened to the reflection on anger or the reflection on emotions, you may want to upon completion of this episode. Taking some time to reflect on why we get angry can be really helpful. Getting underneath your relationship to an emotion and the energy surge it provokes requires a brave moment to be willing to pause and sit with it. Again, we return to awareness, ideally becoming aware of what is unfolding and noticing the moment prior to the experience or after the storm has passed is a fertilizer for growth and understanding. It allows us to address the underlying issues that are causing the anger in the first place. And it also helps us validate our emotions, which is a crucial first step in processing them in a healthy way. But here's the thing. Venting often turns into rumination, which is just going over and over the same angry thoughts. It's like replaying a negative movie in our heads, or when you keep replaying an argument in your head, even hours later. When you have experienced this for yourself, how often do you find yourself going down a rabbit hole and losing track of time? It's easy to get stuck in those cycles, isn't it? Now, it's important to acknowledge that anger is a valid human emotion. Sometimes it's a response to injustice, to being hurt, or to feeling powerless. We all experience it, and it's okay to feel it. It's simply part of the human experience. But even then, we need healthy ways to process it. So what if we could shift our focus? Instead of getting caught up in rumination or trying to burn off the anger with intense activity, what if we tried calming techniques? Let's explore that. Some people try to work off their anger with physical exertion. Now, while exercise is generally good for our health, it might not actually help us calm down in the moment. What the studies did find is that calming activities were effective in reducing anger. Things like slow flow yoga, mindfulness, progressive muscle relaxation, deep breathing, and even just taking a time out, a pause. I would add to that listening to different vibrational frequencies, nature sounds, humming, and tapping into various modalities which support you in dropping into your body, the here and now, ground and support whatever energy is moving through you and be released, is an essential to emotional regulation. If you allow yourself to get curious, move inwards towards the experience, acknowledging it for what it is, can prove quite insightful as you engage in various modalities and practices that support a slow release, and your awareness brings your attention to the subtle shifts of progressive muscle relaxation, and what unfolds with the release of the pent-up energy, the knottedness, the twisted feeling that may occur in your belly, the tension around your heart, along the sides of your neck. Where do you feel it in your body? Practices like various techniques in the ancient yogic tradition can prove supportive, as the impact of coordinated breath and movement helps to calm the nervous system, release, and begin again. Creating and engaging in practices that invite a natural shift in one's experience is an essential to living a life from a space of balance. And when you find yourself in an extreme, practicing the pause, honing your awareness to the imbalance, and then mindfully choosing what will support you in coming back to balance is a game changer. So instead of trying to vent our anger, the researchers recommended trying to cool it down. Using calming techniques works for stress. And when we experience a trigger, our whole body-mind system is being stressed. Most people today would admit that they are dealing with a lot of stress, and learning to navigate the world within and around you in a supportive manner supports a sense of agency. Another interesting finding in the studies was that there was also a hint that ball sports and other fun physical activities might be helpful in reducing arousal. Perhaps it would be worth exploring how exertion might be more effective when it's combined with enjoyment. Of course, more research is needed to fully understand all of this, but for now, it seems like simple calming techniques like taking a time out or counting to 10, simply pausing to recognize what you are feeling without identifying with it, and taking a couple of deep breaths are some of the best tools we have for managing our tempers. What do you think? Does any of this resonate with you? Again, I invite you to get curious and explore this for yourself, and perhaps share this with your family, friends, your own children, or the children who you are in relationship with in your life. So this naturally brings us to talk about how anger and emotional regulation develop especially in children. We all begin as children, have had our own examples growing up of how people that surrounded us dealt with their emotions. There is no handbook that comes with being a parent, and most parents do the best they can with what they know and whatever they are managing. And all we can do is the best we can with what we know. But when we know better, or perhaps have come to understand that something we have learned is not necessarily constructive and supportive of relating to those we love, work with, interact with in the world, learning new skills can always be developed. It can prove helpful to be taught emotional regulation and the power of self-regulation and the agency it provides. So for a moment, let's take a look at one tiny aspect, how the brain in our head works. Examining the interplay between the different contributing parts of the whole is one of my personal favorites, as I find it absolutely fascinating and supportive in understanding the drivers behind our behaviors. So here we go. Did you know that The parts of our brains that help us control our impulses and emotions, like the prefrontal cortex, are actually the slowest to develop. That's why it's so easy for children, and even adults sometimes, to react impulsively or angrily. The lower brain, so to speak, which deals with those immediate emotions, gets a head start. Have you ever noticed the speed of reactivity? It can feel like a blip in time between when you are triggered and your pounce. Often, one can feel a sense of being out of control. The good news is, with practice, you can increase the space between being triggered by something, often unconsciously, and in that space of awareness, creating a pause and mindfully choosing a response, or not responding at all, as a response is not always necessary. So how do we help children learn to manage their anger, pent-up energy, powerful experiences that can feel overwhelming? Well, it's a lot about coaching and modeling. We need to teach them how to pause and think before acting on their impulses. And even more importantly, we need to show them what healthy, calm, and constructive behavior looks like. By doing this, we're helping those prefrontal lobes and the related brain circuits develop and take control. One of the most crucial things we can teach children is how to calm themselves down when they're upset. Think about when a baby is crying. A caregiver soothes them, rocks them. That's not just comforting the baby in the moment, it's also teaching them how to comfort themselves and the others later on. But if you look at modern parenting, sometimes it seems like parents are a bit lost when it comes to dealing with an upset child. Maybe because they themselves weren't taught how to soothe and comfort others. And that brings us to the importance of calming. Have you ever heard of vagal tone? It is related to the vagus nerve and how it connects to our heart, adrenal glands, and amygdala. When the vagal tone is calm, it can actually create a bliss response in both the person calming and the person being calmed. It has shown that talking gently and patiently with children about their feelings and helping them understand those feelings rather than just expressing them is really important for coaching calmness. It is an education in laying the foundation for their emotional well-being. It's a reciprocal process where we guide them, and in turn, we gain a deeper understanding of our own emotional landscape. And of course, modeling a calm demeanor is crucial. To give an example of this, some traditions look to healers to support their community. And to quote a Polynesian healer, one kahuna said, "When there is sickness, I always look at the family to see what their tone is. Sometimes I can feel an angry tone, and I know that no one will be healed until everyone calms down." We do not just express our feeling, we discuss them and teach everyone that they are not just their feelings. It's also essential to be emotionally literate, to be able to read and understand the emotions of others. We spend so much time focusing on verbal literacy, but emotional literacy is just as important. Educator Karen Stone McCown developed a self-science curriculum, which is really about teaching children how to be less selfish and more empathetic. She emphasizes understanding the hurt and needs of others and recognizing nonverbal cues that indicate anger, distress, or fear. To create healthy, life-giving relationships, we need to move beyond focusing solely on ourselves and start focusing on others. We need to shift from codependence to interdependence. And a great way to develop emotional literacy is through something called the perceptive pause. It's simply pausing for a few seconds before speaking to someone, taking a moment to observe their emotional state. Look at them. Try to understand how they're feeling before you start talking. It's about connecting with your eyes before you use your mouth. Always scan for the other person's emotional state before you speak. It's like learning a new language, the language of feelings. All right, let's wrap this up by looking at some practical tools we can use to manage our emotions and express ourselves constructively. Because as we've discussed, it's not about suppressing our feelings, but learning how to work with them. First, it's important to remember that using BodyMind tools to acknowledge and diffuse our feelings is a learned behavior. It takes practice, patience, and consistency. Here are a few things you can try. Talking story, a sharing, admitting, reflecting, and accepting what you are experiencing. This includes your thoughts, physical sensations, emotions, and even your breathing patterns. Bringing awareness and speaking out loud and sharing with someone you trust can prove supportive. Slow movement. Gentle movement can help you ground yourself in your body, return to the present moment, and gradually release pent-up tension. Asking for support. Sometimes we just need a hug, a conversation, or a timeout to process our feelings. Learning to self-soothe. We don't always need to express our emotions outwardly. We can learn to acknowledge them internally, diffuse the intensity, and find our center. Grounding in the present moment. Gently sliding your hands back and forth on your legs and arms. Deep belly breathing, and even the simple act of humming can support a release of physical and mental tension and support a return to a state of calm and grounded silence. Owning your experience, taking responsibility for your feelings rather than blaming others. Learning to talk about your fears. Facing your fears can be a powerful way to reduce anxiety and anger. Setting up the listening. Whenever you want to share something that is challenging for you to speak to, as you may feel vulnerable, afraid of what the other person will say in response to what you are sharing, it is helpful to prepare the listener by introducing what you want to speak to and your hesitancy around it. That allows the listener to take into consideration what you are feeling as well and invites a relating, moving towards one another, seeking understanding. Learning to manage the energetic charge of anger and frustration. Acknowledging the intensity and then learning to diffuse it. Connecting with nature, going for a slow walk, feeling the ground beneath your feet, focusing your attention on the sky above, the sounds of nature. Breathing deeply supports you in creating space from your experience by directing your attention outward and leaning into the support that comes with being in nature. It's calming for the nervous system. Identifying triggers. Learning which foods, substances, statements, or situations that trigger you. Prioritizing rest. Recognizing how rest contributes to stability and calm. Creating sleeping habits that lead to repose and allow our bodies the time it needs to repair while we are in rest mode. Taking responsibility for our actions. Cleaning up after an emotional outburst. Apologizing. And doing the inner work to gradually reduce future explosions. Speaking your truth with respect and diplomacy. Communicating your needs and feelings in a way that honors both yourself and others. And to support you in this journey, resources like Your Reset BodyMind Wellbeing Resource Center offers a variety of tools, including sensescapes, vibrational nature sounds to promote relaxation, BodyMind sessions, slow movement and breath work to release tension, meditation sessions, cultivating awareness and creating space for stillness, rest sessions, recharging and resetting with minimal physical movement, reflection episodes, just like this one, audio recordings to support growth and well-being, explore sessions, connecting with the body for grounding and calm, somatics, releasing tension and pent-up emotions through fascia work. It's all about learning to manage our emotions in a healthy and constructive way, and these tools can help us do just that. By interacting with various modalities, we're not just managing anger, we're also cultivating a deep sense of inner peace, stronger connections with others, and a greater ability to navigate life's challenges. It's a practice of returning to wholeness. And if you feel that you are consistently angry and that these practices may not be enough, perhaps you may want to seek professional help to support you in working through the repeating pattern of anger showing up in your experience. It's helpful to remember that when you shut down emotion, you are also affecting your immune system and your nervous system. So the repression of emotion, which is a survival strategy, then becomes a source of physiological illness later. This week, perhaps try taking a few minutes each day for deep breathing, and perhaps do this with your children as well. See how it makes each of you feel. Remember, managing your emotions is a journey, not a destination. Be kind to yourself and keep exploring. I will leave you with these words of wisdom by Dr. Gabor Mate. It's not about feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to like, share, or follow. I invite you to join me and a fabulous group of people for a brand new BodyMind well-being series, Pleasure. Do you feel overwhelmed by the constant demands of modern life? Is your mind a whirlwind of obligations and endless to-do lists? Are you longing for a sense of calm and joy amidst the chaos? We'll be working to create a balance in work, play, and love, a perfect experience and practice for the spring season. We begin on Sunday, April 27th. Feel free to reach out with any questions, and I hope to see you there.